Can you think of a social movement that has happened in India? Maybe the movement that has happened recently, where a lot of protest happened against the Citizenship Amendment Act and NRC. And before that, we have seen Nirbhaya movement, Jallikattu movement. So these are the movements in the recent, in the last decade, which we have seen in the history of India. So what is a social movement? How we can define a social movement? A social movement can be defined like this. It is an activity where a number of people organized and coordinated together to achieve some task or a collection of goals, where often the participants are interested in bringing about a social change. So in short, we can see few features of social movement in this definition. One is it's a collective activities designed to bring about a change. It's collective activities to bring a change or even to resist a change. Then we can see it could bring a shift in social policy and social structure. So it impacts the social policy and social structure. And then it shapes the direction of society. It decides where the society has to head towards. And finally, it affects public opinion. Any social movement, it will change the public opinion or it will have a direct impact on the public opinion. So how a social movement happens? There are four areas in which social movements normally operate in modern societies. One is democratic movements. These kind of democratic movements, they work for political rights. This happens to get political rights when it is denied. One of the best examples for this can be the freedom struggle movement, where people worked for the Swarajya. And number two, labor movements. Labor movements, it organized by trade unions for the welfare of workers and quality of workplace. And number three, ecological movements that are concerned with the environment. We have seen a lot of ecological movements in the history of India, where we have seen Chipko movement, Silicon Valley movement, Tehri Dam conflict, like this we have seen a lot of ecological movements happening also. And finally, peace movements. Peace movements, normally these kind of movements happens to reinstate well-being and peace in the world. For example, the anti-nuclear movement and these kind of movements can be called as peace movements. So based on the activities of the social movement, they can be divided into three. One is general movements, general social movements. They have a general direction towards which they move into slowly halting yet persistent fashion they organize. Main general movements are labor movements, youth movement, women movements. These kind of movements we normally call as general social movements. And in specific social movements, instances of this type of movements are reform movements and revolutionary movements. The morale of this type of movements is that what is unjust, what is evil, what is improper, wrong will be eradicated with the success of these movements. And finally, expressive social movements. The main characteristic feature of expressive social movement is that they do not seek to change the institutions of the social order or its objective character. It wants to show its existence and want to stagnate the present structure and social order. Now let us see how a social movement emerges. Okay, there are two major theories that talk about the emergence of social movements. One is relative deprivation and number two is resource mobilization. These two theories explain how a social movement emerge, what are the factors that normally contribute for the emergence of social movements? One is relative deprivation. Relative deprivation, what does it mean? When there is a negative discrepancy between legitimate expectations and present actualities, a social movement may emerge. When there is a big difference between the legitimate expectation and prevailing actualities, social movement may emerge. And number two is when there is a discontent, when being deprived of something to which one believes oneself to be entitled, then there social movements may emerge. And finally, getting deprived of things deemed valuable in society like money, justice, status, or privilege. Even this situation, social movements emerge. That is, then people are deprived of things that has to be given to them, then there will be a comparison, and that deprivation will result in emergence of social movement. Example for relative deprivation can be American Civil Rights Movement, Dalit Movement, RTI, RTE, that is Right to Information, Right to Education, Brahmo Samaj. This can be example for relative deprivation. I'm going to list out few movements as example for each explanation. So it will take more time, and if I explain each movement in detail. So I request all the students to make note of these movements and go and just see the detail of these movements. It will be very helpful for you when you write your examination, where you can give these examples which will be very helpful for your answer. Next is resource mobilization. Resource mobilization means the resources like time, money, skill, how these resources it contributes for the success of the social movement, and the movement's ability to use these particular resources. The movement's success in terms of its ability to acquire resources and mobilize individuals to achieve goals. For example, here the example can be Jallikattu, where a protest happened to reinstate Jallikattu when it was banned. People fought against that particular act, and they demand reinstating the game called Jallikattu. It's a bullfight in Tamil Nadu, where the PETA, an organization which functions for the benefit of animals, they banned, with their guidance only, the government banned the Jallikattu, but still a very big protest movement happened in Chennai, in Marina Beach, and it went on for several days, and finally Jallikattu was able to mobilize all the resources, people, and it was able to get big impact. It was able to give big impact in its movement, and it made the government to pass an immediate ordinance to lift the ban, and Jallikattu is happening even now. And also the Green Revolution. Green Revolution is, what is Green Revolution, but now a new Green Revolution is coming, where it goes just opposite to the Green Revolution that happened, where totally the organic farming was has been totally avoided in the previous Green Revolution because of the yield which they were working on those days. But now people are very much concerned about yield and also organic farming to protect the land and also the crops. Next is the stages which we see in any social movement. Stages any social movement come across. Number one, it's emergence, the stage of emergence. Any social movement that starts, that stage is called emerge. When there is a discontent, or then there is a deprivation, when there is a kind of people are not comfortable with the existing thing, and a social movement emerge. And next it goes to the next stage we call it as coalesce stage. Coalesce means once the emerged social movement gaining momentum. Gaining momentum means many people coming together, becoming part of that movement and making it as a mass movement. And next, it further go to the next stage where bureaucratize. The movement gets bureaucratized. Bureaucratized means movement becomes more organized and it expands to even power holders. So this stage is called as bureaucratic, where it gains much more momentum, where it goes to the power holders and it becomes more organized. And then it goes to a peak and then it declines. So before decline of the social movement, many things happen. One, it may be success. Some social movements, they get success and then it declines. Success means whatever they were looking for, whatever the changes they were looking for in the society, that changes, it happens. And next, failure. Then co-optation. Co-optation means the leaders getting a position in the opposite side, and with that the social movement getting declined. Probably we can call it as leadership is declining. A leadership becomes part of or given a responsibility in the opposition side. So that's that way the social movement declines. And then repression. Repression here means the government or the opposite party that suppresses the movement. They, with their law, with the other way, they suppress the movement, and with that the movement come to an end without any success. And finally, going mainstream. Going mainstream, the movement itself become part of the mainstream activity. For example, if any particular movement that becomes, for example, the labor movement. Labor movement, initially they'll go against what's happening and they look for a change. And later, that particular movement itself will become will be converted into a union, a trade union, some kind of thing. So it becomes part of mainstream. So that's called as mainstream. So with these things, finally it goes to the last stage, that is the decline stage of the social movement. Next week we are going to see different social movements that has happened in India and also in other places. Number one, civil disobedience movement. This movement, you would have heard about it in your history classes. This movement is one of the successful movements that really triggered, the people, in the Indian independence movement actually. And main essence of the civil disobedience movement is going against the rules and law of the government legitimately. Examples for the civil, what and all happened during the civil disobedience movement is the Champaran Satyagraha, Salt Satyagraha, and many events that happened as part of the civil disobedience movement. And then Chipko movement in 1973. This movement, probably you would have heard about it. It was started in early 1970s and it was aimed at protection and conservation of trees and forests from being destroyed. The name Chipko originated from the word embrace, as the villagers used to hug the trees and protect them from the woodcutters from cutting them. Actually, it had gained momentum under the leadership of Sundarlal Bahuguna, an activist. It influenced the policies, and restriction of cutting trees has been imposed by the then Prime Minister Indira Gandhi. That was a successful movement. Even today, people, very much they remember Chipko movement whenever there is a threat for the forest. Next is Narmada Bachao Andolan. You would have heard about this particular movement. It is a movement initiated by environmentalists, farmers, tribal people, and human rights activists against the construction of Sardar Sarovar Dam on Narmada River. One of the main advocates of this particular movement is, about her, Medha Patkar. It has become a controversial issue due to the problems in the forms of displacement of local people, loss of livelihoods, and deforestation. And then Nirbhaya movement, very much you know about this. I don't have to tell a lot about this. This Nirbhaya movement, after the brutal rape and murder of Nirbhaya, and after that the whole country, they protest against the safety. They spoke about the safety of women, and there an act also has been passed for the safety of women. And after that, the movement against Kudankulam nuclear project. This is another big environmental movement. This is against the Kudankulam nuclear project near in Tamil Nadu. And people living nearby villages, they were very much against the working of this Kudankulam nuclear reactor, which they thought that would be a big threat for their livelihood and their generations actually. And then next, Me Too movement. This is another famous movement. It's a whole world. We could see the impact of this Me Too movement, and often, of course, in India also it spread like anything, and it really empowered women to come out and louder. They were able to speak louder. They were able to really make people really feel stronger. So that's Me Too movement. So as I've told you, there are many movements throughout the world, in India, many movements. So I have specified certain movements where I couldn't give you more details about this, but I have made a list of it throughout this presentation. So you go and you please know more about these movements, which will be helpful for you in understanding the whole concept called social movement, and also will be helpful for you in presenting it in examination. So with this, we come to the end of this video lecture. Hope this was very useful for you. Thank you.